You're listening to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast, your source of music news, stories, and 2-hour deep dive interviews with bands that have sold over 150 million albums. If you've been enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Now let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. We are joined by a very special guest. He's achieved a level of mastery as a member of the Juno nominated, multi-platinum selling, and #1 charting band My Darkest Days, as well as Smashing Satellites and Bonds of Mara. So welcome to the podcast, Sal Costa. Sal, how are you? And is it true that you once got a phone call from Bret Michaels giving you just 3 hours notice to play guitar for Poison?
First off, I'm doing good. Yes, that is true. I think it was like circa 2012, 2013. Actually, if you go back a year before that, like 2011, Bret Michaels, we opened for his solo band, maybe even like a year before that. But anyways, we opened up for his solo band. And I guess Bret Michaels caught the show because, he was watching from side stage. I had no idea. And there was like on the My Darkest Days tour, there was a whole section where I do like a couple-minute guitar solo kind of thing. And after the show, he kind of came up to me and in passing, he's like, "Hey man, that was really awesome." He's like, you're a great player. And I was like, "Oh, thanks." And I thought that was cool enough because growing up, I have two sisters that are 9 and 11 years older than me. And my sister who's 9 years older than me was like a huge Poison fan. And you would walk in her room, there was just a huge poster of Bret Michaels. So I thought that was just kind of cool. It was like a nostalgia kind of thing. But fast forward, I think like a year later, I had like 2 days off tour. And I used to live right downtown Toronto, right at like Blue Jays Way in front. And like I said, 2 days off. I was like exhausted. And I was starting to put a little demo recording studio in my condo at the time. At the time, me and my girlfriend were living, now my wife. And I needed like a patch cord. I needed something that I didn't have in my place. So I just walked over to Steve's Music on Queen Street and I was with my wife. And I was talking to one of the guys in the recording area. And like, I am not a technological person at all. Dude, like if I get signed into my email, I'll just create a new email. Like that's it. It's gone forever. I don't like to troubleshoot that stuff. I hate all of that stuff. It just drives me crazy. It bogs me down. So I was really trying to take in what this guy was saying to me, and I'm just like trying to absorb it because, like I said, I'm just not technological. And my phone rings, and I look at the phone. I don't recognize the number, and I just give it to at the time, my girlfriend, Jamie. I'm like, "Can you just answer? And if it's something important, just, take the call for me." And I just hear her, she's talking. She's like looking at me. She's like, somebody's on the phone for you. It's Bret Michaels. And I pick up the phone, and it's Bret Michaels. Like, "Hey, brother, how's it going?" He's just like, I heard you live in Toronto and I heard you're in town right now. He's like, "Well, we're on tour with Motley Crue right now. And I'd love for you to come play with us tonight." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. That'd be awesome." And he's just like, this is the song I want you to play. And I want to showcase you on. And he's just like, "Just show up with your Flying V." Cause at the time, everyone kind of knew me for playing that Flying V guitar. And he's like, "Just show up at this location. A van's going to pick you up. It's going to take you to my tour bus and we'll talk about it." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." So I'm just like, "When do we get to rehearse?" He's like, "Oh no, no rehearsal. Like, I believe in you. You'll get it done." I'm like, "Okay." So show up at the Molson Amphitheater. I think it's called Budweiser Stage now, or maybe it was then too. But anyways, I show up to the location and it's like kind of right in front of like the ticket booth area. And I got just standing there with my girlfriend in a Flying V, and there's all these people walking in. They're recognizing me from My Darkest Days, and they're like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, I didn't know if I was allowed to say anything. I'm like, I don't know. I might be playing tonight. And Van picks me and my wife up. We go onto Bret's tour bus, and we start talking with Bret, have a conversation, just talking about music and whatnot. And I'm still thinking like, okay, maybe we're not going to jam, but like, am I going to get to do a sound check? And he's like, no. He's like, "You're just going to go up there and we got an amp set up for you and, wireless, and you'll just do your thing." And I'm like, "Man, I'm not going to even get to like figure out my guitar sound or anything like that." So I'm like, "Okay, all good." So time comes and they pull me side stage. It's packed house. And Bret Michaels is doing like a harmonica solo. and me and my wife were just watching, and Bret has a part in the set. Like, you know, a lot of times on stage, like I would coordinate with my guitar tech. I would throw a guitar and it was all choreographed. He would be able to catch the guitar. So he's going to do the same thing with his harmonica. He finishes playing and then he just throws the harmonica and his tech catches it. And he takes the harmonica and he freaking throws this thing like a ninja star. And it just goes right past the tech's hand. And as I'm warming up on my guitar, it just pins me right here. And my arm went completely limp. And I'm like, it just hit something. We're like, oh my God, I can't move my arm. And I was like, oh, how am I going to play now? And then I start hearing him say, like, you know, I'm going to bring one of my really good friends, you know, on stage named Sal Costa for My Darkest Days. And I'm like, I can't move my arm. So my wife just starts like shaking it. And it just kind of like came back as I started to walk on and play. But it was really funny. We always remember that. And I had like a giant welt of like a harmonica on my shoulder. So that was a funny time. It was awesome. And then I ended up actually a couple of weeks later, Bret called me and he was like, that was a lot of fun. He's like, I have a solo record coming out. Miley Cyrus is going to be on it. Joe Perry, I want to say, I think Gavin DeGraw was on it too. It's called Bret Michaels and Friends. And he's just like, the first single is called Get Your Rock On. He's like, I want you to be on the first single with Phil Collins from Def Leppard. And I was like, hell yeah. So I got to do that too. And I recorded all of that actually from my home studio and sent all the files off to Bret's producer at the time. And it was really cool to see even that come together, you know, just like that's how it goes. Like one little thing, you know, manifested all these other little things. But he's a super, super sweet guy. I love Bret. He's awesome.
And were you familiar with the Poison song before playing it, or you had to learn it for that show?
I mean, like, I didn't know how to play it. But it was like, it was nothing but a good time. So I've heard the song a million times. So, and I was like, oh, that's going to be an awesome one to play. So I just, you know, I went home. I was just like, okay, that's the song. And then that was pretty much it.
That's like where someone has more faith in you than you have in yourself, where he's like, you'll learn it. Like, oh, the sound guy will make sure it sounds good. You don't have to sound check.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like my wife. Even like my, I said, at the time, my girlfriend. I'm like, I don't know, we're not gonna jam together. Like, I have no idea what's gonna go. She's like, just do your thing. And I was like, you know, it's funny. Like you said, sometimes other people have more faith in you than you do in yourself. You know. So
when your arm went numb because of the harmonica, it reminds me of, I'm a big UFC fan, and sometimes a guy will get kicked in the calf and then just the leg goes numb and they just have to lie down. They can't stand anymore. It sounds like that, where you hit a certain nerve and that's it.
Totally. Yeah, I do actually jujitsu. So I train about three days a week, and like I love wrestling, and it's the same thing, man. Yeah, you just sometimes like somebody can just put their knee on you as they're like trying to pass you or whatever, and it just like paralyzes like half your body. I'm like, yeah, totally same thing.
So I like to start off the interviews by sharing with our listeners how the guests and I know each other, just to show the importance of networking, of building community, fostering relationships. So in our case, we go back just a few weeks where I did an interview with Dave Benedict of Default and Bonds of Mara that we'll talk about. And he mentioned you during the interview, and I sent you the clip because I thought you'd be interested in seeing it. And then from there, you provided some kind words for a recent interview with Trevor McNeven from 1,000 Foot Crutch and FM Static, as well as his solo stuff, T-Rock. So we started talking a little bit, and you mentioned, hey, I'd love to do a chat, and here we are today. So that's how we ended up here. So again, it's funny how the dots connect.
I think actually the history even goes a little bit further, because I think you remember playing with us, like My Darkest Days, like probably 15 years ago, maybe more. You know?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up in a little bit, but the biggest show that my band ever played was opening for My Darkest Days, who was opening for Default at the X in Ottawa. And it's so wild to, you know, we're going to talk about My Darkest Days, but to, you know, meet you guys at that show. And, you know, Default was the headliner. People were there for Default, but I met you guys and it's like, oh, these guys are awesome. They're nice guys. And then a few years later, I remember saying, "Oh, that's crazy. They just signed with 604 Records." And then
Yeah.
Porn Star Dancing comes out, and I'm like, "Oh my God, that's a great song. Like that sounds like a hit." And then the song goes to number one, and then there's the music video, and I'm like, "Oh man, Chad Kroeger from Nickelback is in the video." And then, oh man, Zach
Yeah.
Wilde, Black Label Society, and Ozzy Osbourne is in the video, and then, oh, Ludacris, and I'm like, man, these
Yeah.
guys have made it. Like I don't know how many more points you need to know that a band has made it than all the things I just named in a row for My Darkest Day.
Yeah. It was crazy. It was really crazy. We can go into that a little bit if you want, how that came together. Um, we, I kind of joined the band halfway through making their first album. And Chad was producing it with Joy Moy, and the band needed I think one more song for the record. And Matt was writing with a guy named Ted Bruner, who's like a writer for Katy Perry and a bunch of, other, very established musicians. They put together Porn Star Dancing. And it's interesting because I think that song completely just changed the trajectory completely of what the band was going to be. Ended up being very cool. But what's crazy about that whole thing was I remember when we had the first version of the song and we find out Chad's going to be on it. And we're like, oh my God, that's so cool. He identified, I think, too, that's going to be a single. He's like, I'll lend my vocals on it. And then Chad had apparently met up with Zach Wilde somewhere and showed Zach the song. And he's like, hey, would you want to play on this with the guys? And Zach was like, he was in. And then through, being, I guess, signed to Def Jam, and Ludacris is on that label. Ludacris got, a hold of the song, and then Ludacris wanted to be on the song. But you have to imagine at the time that all of this is happening, we are all rehearsing in a basement in Pickering, Ontario. All the other guys lived at that house. I was living downtown at the time, so I would commute there to just rehearse every day. And we're just getting all of this information, and we're thinking like, this is going to be huge. And even just kind of like being like an independent, no, actually, time we weren't independent because we were signed to Def Jam, but nothing had happened yet. We just knew like, how can this not do something? And then we find out that we're going to be making this huge budget music video. We go to Las Vegas to shoot it from our rehearsal space, pretty much in Pickering, Ontario. And now, Def Jam has rented out the entire top floor of the Hard Rock Hotel in Vegas. There's freaking helicopters everywhere. There's like 70 strippers that they got at Spearmint Rhino. I think they were actually at one point, I don't know if this was a joke, but somebody from Def Jam was saying this might be a Guinness Book of Record for the most strippers ever in a music video. And then you just see like Ludacris walk in and Zach Wilde, Chad's there. And it was so surreal because, again, at this point, we had done really nothing. And it was just that feeling of like, holy shit, this is going to be big. And then, we kind of go back to Pickering, Ontario, can continue rehearsing. And then we just start seeing this song start climbing the charts in America. But we're at our rehearsal space in Pickering, Ontario. Our manager's calling us like, it's on the charts now. And we're like, what? It's getting radio play in America? That's crazy. And then it just, honestly, it took off from there. We got our first opening tour spot. It was opening up for Sick Puppies. We were first of 4 opening up for Sick Puppies on that US tour. And I think we were getting paid $500 a night on that tour. And that had to cover like band, crew, gas. We were living essentially in the van. The van had a hole in it, so rocks would shoot up at you as you were sitting in it. And that video got so big, and the song just went to #1 as we were first of 4 opening for Sick Puppies. So you could start seeing from the beginning of the tour, we had no draw at all. And then you could see by like midway through the tour, like people were coming out to see My Darkest Days and singing the song. And that was, again, crazy surreal. And I remember there was one night, me, Matt, and the drummer for Sick Puppies, it was like late night after show. We were at like a Waffle House, and he was just like, dude, that song is going to be the biggest song in the country this year. It's going to go #1. And Matt and I were like, oh, thanks, man. I don't know. And sure as shit, he was right. It did. And that was pretty much it. It just exploded.
It's funny you say, obviously it's a big budget music video. I think even if everything wasn't big budget, it would be big budget just having to pay all those strippers as extras. Like if you're just paying them a few $1,000s each, right away you have a big budget music video, even if it looked terrible, if there wasn't a good location, if there wasn't all the guest artists in it.
Dude, that's what I'm saying. Like this was like 2009, I think that we made the video, or 2010. Like there wasn't drones. Like that was all helicopters. So we were just like, I remember sitting there being like, how much did this cost? Like, it's insane. It was ridiculous. But it was super cool.
Man, I have so much to say about Porn Star Dancing, so I'll just give a little bit of the
Go for it.
accolades about it.
Yep.
So it spent 2 weeks at #1 on the Billboard mainstream rock charts in the US. It was a top 10 hit on Billboard's rock song charts. It was top 3 on the rock charts in Canada. The song and music video combined on Spotify and YouTube have over 320 million plays.
Mhm.
Why do you think people love that song so much? And how do you even try to grasp the concept of numbers that big?
I mean, I think so many things lined up with that song, honestly. So you have obviously the song was a hit, but then you had the music video, which had like, people who were like Ludacris fans were now hearing this rock band. And then people who were like Black Label Society fans probably weren't a huge fan of it, like they're diehard, but Zach was on it. It brought a lot of all these different groups. Like I was trying to think, like, when's the last time that's kind of really happened? It's like Aerosmith, Run DMC, there
You're
was
saying where music video is actually kind of leading the way.
with the song as well, but it was like we mixed a bunch of different artists from different genres together. Like when would you ever see Ludacris on a rock song? I don't think it's ever happened, probably won't happen again. And it was just crazy. Like you're listening to like all these other bands on the rock charts that's like heavy rock, but then like you got Ludacris on a song with us. But I think we were also the right band for that song at that time. We were just young and wild and crazy, and we were known as a crazy band. Like everyone who ever toured with our band, they're just like, man, that you guys partied harder than any band we've ever toured with. So I think it was authentic at that time, for us. And I also just think, it it was one of those things that like we would start playing that, and even even a grandmother would just be like start feeling slutty for some reason, like just like I don't know, it just brought that out in all these girls, and girls would just go wild. People you would never think, like school teachers and stuff, as soon as we started playing that song, it just everyone would let go. I don't know, it had the magic juice, magic sauce. It's one of those things that your whole life you try and figure out how to, I guess, be a part of something like that, but it just happened. And I just think we were the right guys for the song. Like I think if it was another band that had that song at the time, I don't know if they would have been able to pull it off. It was just authentic for us at that time. So I think that was a huge part of it, and we were a lot of fun. Like we always had these crazy tours on our bus. So I think very quickly, once people started, like, even within the music industry, hanging around us before and after show, they were like, that is this band. And I think there was a certain authenticity that came with it that made it more real, and people wanted to be around it. And that's one of the things I noticed about our band. Like everybody wanted to be around us. I don't know, people just wanted to experience being around these crazy bunch of dudes. So I think that had a lot. There was like some folklore, I think, that also went along with the music as well. And then also, you have Def Jam behind you, which is what bands at that time were getting signed to a label like that. So there was just so much push in so many different ways. Yeah, it was pretty epic.
So was it 604 Records in Canada and then Def Jam Mercury in the US?
Yes, and then Spine Farm Universal in Europe. So all under the Universal umbrella, but Def Jam was the one that like essentially provided the budget and a lot of the major push for the band. Like, there's a lot of resources that a label like that has, and they use them all to like make sure that we were successful. And it was an amazing experience. Like L.A. Reid, um, uh, from the Babyface. He was the one who signed us with David Massey. David Massey had signed Oasis. So it was like this pedigree of people that were also behind it, that believed in it. That I think that alone, when people just heard, like, L.A. Reid and David Massey signed this band from Toronto, people took it seriously.
Do you think that you guys were known as this fun band, this party band? Do you think that the image created by the porn star dancing music video, it created this thing that you had to live up to as well? Like you were young and liked to have fun, but do you feel like there was also this other thing now that had been created that you had to be congruent with the image of that video?
I think the band was like that um, before the song, but I think the song took it to a whole other level. You know, now you're like surrounded by. That's the other thing too. Since like the song became so big, it's like now all these famous porn stars wanting to hang around the band. All these like every time we pull into like a city or our tour schedule, we would have like strip clubs being like, "Can you guys make an appearance at our strip club?" You know, and we get picked up in a limo and taken to like the biggest strip club in town and just to hang out. And I just think it perpetuated it and just made it bigger. But I don't know if I don't want to speak for the other guys, but I found for myself personally, it became one of those things where I wanted to personally evolve, and it became very hard to evolve out of that. Like, how do you be the band that has porn star dancing, and how do you evolve from that? I think that was a hard thing. And because I personally would have loved the band has so many other great songs that I think were better songs, more timeless in a different way than porn star dancing. I think porn star dancing is going to be timeless, like a Mambo Number Five type timeless, where it's just like people hear that song and know that song kind of thing. But there were other songs on those albums that I think were like timeless in a way where you would want to show those to your grandkids type songs. And I think the success of Porn Star Dancing kind of overshadowed some of that. So yeah, but it was definitely, I think there was a struggle at some point to be like, okay, like we have to be these guys now because this is what people expect, and you could feel it like when people are around you, like, okay, what are you guys going to do now? And it's just like, well, I'm tired, but you just kind of feel like that pressure to just be that person that burns you out in a different way.
So I've heard that the most popular song at strip clubs over the years is Closer from Nine Inch Nails because
Yeah.
it's such a has such a good groove and a dark groove, and the lyrics are very sexual and dirty. So that's like all time the number one strip club song. Man, Porn Star
Yep.
Dancing since then has to be up there as well. I don't know if there's charts that tell you, hey, we're charting at strip clubs or something, but have you heard that?
I have heard at one point, I don't know if it's now still, but at one point, I don't remember who it was that told me this. It might have been somebody at the label, but they were just like, it's the most played song in strip clubs right now. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But funny enough, I have a buddy who I just recently found out. He's somebody who actually works for me. And he was just like, he's just like, my wife is actually a stripper. And he's like, and she dances to your song all the time. And he's like, he's like, I think it's actually pretty cool because I'm just like, I know that guy, So it still happens, And anytime like I'll meet somebody, from that world, they're like, I dance to that song all the time, or it's my favorite song. So yeah,
It gets the
pretty
people
crazy.
going.
It gets the people going. It's that's what I was saying. Like the second we would play that, the roof would just explode wherever we were playing. And backtrack a little bit, like saying we had this massive music video, and we were on that Sick Puppies tour, like I said, making $500 a night. And I remember vividly pulling into a show at Scout Bar in Houston, Texas, and there being this huge lineup around the venue, and it was for us because it was a headline show. I think it was one of our first maybe headline shows. And I remember just seeing this, holy shit, like these people are actually here for us. We started seeing it, midway through the Sick Puppies tour, but then this is like, people are here for us. And I remember pulling in with our jalopy van and people being like, we roll out of that thing, just like looking all crazy because we've been living in a van, and people being like, you guys aren't in a private jet. Like we saw the music video. You guys look like you just be like rolling out in like multiple buses and jets, but nothing had, monetized yet. It was so fresh. So it was funny. So yeah, man, it was a ride. I'll tell you that much for sure.
There are so many misconceptions about musicians in the music industry, and that's one of them. I just interviewed Simple Plan, and they were telling me that they had just sold 4 million copies of their debut album, and they were broke and
Yeah.
they were worried. Like it takes years for the royalties and to
Yes.
pay off the initial
Yeah.
loan from the record label. So these guys are 4 million sold, biggest band on the planet, and they
Yeah.
had side hustles to pay rent.
It takes time for it all to catch up. And I remember too, like when it took off, like people from high school asking for all kinds of weird stuff. There was this bully from high school. Funny enough, he used to beat up everybody in the school. He was the leader of a Korean gang of the school that I went to, and this guy would beat the shit out of everybody and just rob them. The teachers were scared of him. Everybody was scared of this guy, and I was lucky. The very first day of high school, everyone had told me about this guy coming in. I get on a bus, and I get on a bus, and I see him get on the same bus as me, and I'm like, holy shit, it's so and so. He's just gonna. He was older too. I think at that time he was already in 12th grade or 13th at the time, and I think he had also stayed back a couple. He was older. He was probably like 18. I was like a kid. I'm like, oh man, there he is. Like he's just gonna beat the shit out of me when I get out of this bus. It turns out that I get out of the bus at my stop, and he gets off at the same stop. I'm like, it's gonna go down now. And he comes up to me. He's like, you live in this neighborhood? I'm like, yeah. He's like, me too. You're safe from now on. So I never got it, but I would walk down the street with my friends, at school, and he would beat the shit out of all of my friends and just be like, high five me. He'd be like, you're cool. We live in the same neighborhood. Anyways, long story short, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when My Darkest Days took off, I get a message one day in my DMs on Facebook, and I put it up, and it's this guy, and he's like, I need bail money. And he's like, I know you're rich now. He's just like, can you pony up some cash because I need to get, I'm gonna need some bail money soon or something like that. So it was funny, people reaching out for all kinds of random stuff. I'm like, dude, we're living in a van right now, dude. Like, we're not there yet.
So I just have a couple more questions about porn star dancing, and then we're going to
Sure.
take it all the way back to the beginning of your music career. So the single Porn Star Dancing goes gold in the US. It goes 3 times platinum in Canada. Do you remember
Mm-hmm.
receiving the news that the song had gone gold and then platinum and then multi-platinum?
I remember when I remember when the song went number one. I think that was a way bigger moment than it going gold. I remember when it went gold and platinum. It was like a very like, oh, by the way, it's gone platinum and gold now, and we're gonna send you your plaques. Which, by the way, we had to buy our plaques. Which I was just like, what? Like we just had we gold and platinum records. So that's another thing. That wasn't even gifted by the record labels. We had to physically buy them. And I was like, I almost didn't want to buy it. I'm like, that's insane. But I was just like, I'll regret it. Not one day not having that plaque on my wall. But I'm like, come on, you're not going to give us our plaques. We have to fucking buy them. But I remember when the song went number one, we had this pit bull of a radio guy that worked at Def Jam. His name was David McGilvray. I fucking love. Can I swear, by the way?
Sure.
Okay. It'll come out at some point. I'm really resisting. So we had this pit bull of a radio guy named David McGilvray, and this guy was he was a fighter, man. Like he would just not let anyone say no, and everyone had to play that song. He was that guy, the guy that like, the unsung hero almost in a way that no one knows the name. This is his name. His name's David McGilvray. And I remember there was a night he came out to see us. I want to say we were playing in Minneapolis, I believe. And David came out. He's just like, the song is going to go number one tonight. And I remember I think it was after the show, if I recall correctly, he's like, it's number one. And I remember that being like, oh my God, like, there's been a lot of bands that have had hits and big songs, but to like have your first song be the number one song in America, in the country that everybody wants to be number one in. I remember just thinking in that moment, it's just like at that point in time, we were the number one at something in the country that everyone wants to be number one in, whether you're a professional athlete or, whatever it is. And I think that was the moment that actually struck me the most. And I still think about that sometimes too. When I think about that, you know, or my wife will point it out. I'll be like, he's like the best. He's the best basketball player or whatever. She's like, you guys were number one at some point too. And I think about, think about that kind of stuff, or like she'll point out like, don't kind of degrade, what you did as well. You were there, you did something like that too, So I think that moment is something that like struck me then, and it still is something I think about now.
So we're going to do a full 2 hour deep dive interview. We're going to cover your life, your career, your discography. There's still a lot to talk about My Darkest Days,
Sure.
the debut album, the follow-up album, the other singles. There's Smashing Satellites, there's Bonds of
Yep.
Mara, there's upcoming projects. Lots to get to, but I want to go all the way back to the beginning. Where does
Let's
this
do
love
it.
of music come from? Is there an earliest musical memory that stands out to you?
Yes. My parents weren't musical people, but my mom was like a poet, and she wrote like amazing poetry. My mom had a very lot of like crazy dark things that happened in her life, and I think she was just able to put that on paper. But I have very strong memories as a kid of my eldest sister Kathy playing piano, and she was a fantastic piano player, and I just would love watching her play. And then my other sister, Monique, she was kind of like a 90s goth, you know? And
Her favorite movie was The Craft.
yeah, like something like that kind of vibe. Yeah. And she had the most incredible CD collection. And when she wasn't around, I kind of go into her room and kind of just rummage through and listen to her records, or I'd always just listen to her playing stuff in her bedroom. And so I think, well, all my friends were kind of like at the time, like listening to like Hanson, Backstreet Boys. I was listening to Guns N' Roses, Nirvana, um, Poison, Oasis. I was like, that's what I was into. So immediately I just wanted to be a part of that. And naturally I gravitated to writing. Like that was something that I liked, and that even at that age, I was able to understand how to put together a song. So that's kind of really where it started for me, is that was that inspiration of just that. And then I remember the very first time as a kid, I think I was watching Much Music and seeing the Eagles. Sometimes Much Music would do like the retro videos. They'd play some of the retro videos. It was a video of the Eagles playing Hotel California. And I'm watching them play, and I hear the voice. I'm just like seeing the guys at the front of the stage. I'm like, who's singing? Like, I don't understand. And then it kind of goes back, and you just see Don Henley playing drums and singing. I was just like, that is fucking cool. And I don't know, that was another moment that made me just like, oh, I want to do it. And then lastly, my sister had this the Use Your Illusion tour tape, VHS tape, and I remember putting that in one day and just seeing Slash and being like, that is the coolest fucking thing I've ever seen. I want to do that. That's what I want to do. And that's kind of really where it started for me. That's where it started to bubble up.
And was it Slash that inspired you to want to actually play guitar yourself?
It was a combination of Slash, Kurt Cobain, and John Frusciante from the Chili Peppers, who's probably still my all-time favorite guitar player ever. And then I got into Pink Floyd. I love David Gilmour and Led Zeppelin. I love Jimmy Page. I was more into that style of playing guitar, kind of like the funky, cool, bluesy rock kind of lead playing. I had to learn how to do something completely different for My Darkest Days, because they were more of like a new rock style band. And that was like a challenge for me at first, because I came from a different school of rock, the way I would write and play and learn. But I was also grateful for that too, because it evolved my playing. It allowed me to kind of do other things. So, but yeah, that's kind of where Slash was like one of the big ones for sure.
In which ways do you think growing up in Toronto shaped you as a musician and as a person?
Well, I grew up pretty much in the city, and I I guess one of the ways it shaped me was, at the time, there was a scene in Toronto where you could go and play a show, and there would be independent bands that had a following. And I don't know, honestly, if that happens now. I don't think like, that's what people do as a pastime is go see independent bands. But back then you could do that. And I remember there was this band called Zygote. And they were from Toronto area, and they had a pretty huge independent following. And I was just thinking, I was like, man, that's crazy. I could probably do that. Like if we have good enough songs, we could probably like have some people, play out in Toronto. And I would just kind of, walk around Queen Street, up and down, all over the place, and just walk through all the venues and just kind of breathe it in and take it in. And I think that really shaped me because, like I said, I was kind of like more urban city boy. And I was lucky to be in the city because everything's always happening in the major cities. So I got to kind of see, culture and walk into venues and bars and just be a part of it and be able to play them. And I think that really shaped a lot for me, just being around the city and the grunginess. And yeah.
What do I need to know about your childhood to understand the person that's in front of me today?
I'm a first generation Italian. My entire family are all immigrants. If you were to speak to my dad now, you'd probably have a hard time understanding him still. So I grew up around like really rough Italian people. And, I remember having a girlfriend in high school, and she came over to my house once, and with all my family there, and she was just like, afterwards, she was silent at the dinner, and afterwards she's just like, why were you guys fighting? And I was just like, what do you mean? We weren't fighting. It's just we talk with our hands and we're just loud. Like she was like, so I came from this kind of boisterous, loud, passionate, upbringing. Italian people by nature are very passionate, and me being first generation, no one was watered down in my family. Like they were from the old country. And I think looking back now, I was actually saying this to my wife, like I really appreciated that upbringing because whether they knew it or not, they were all artists. Like we would not buy anything really at a store. Like everything was like home cooked meals. And it was like manly for a man to be in the kitchen as well and to be able to create and cook and stuff like that. So I was around food and cooking and stuff at a really young age. And some of my fondest memories are of my grandparents cooking and these big meals. So I was surrounded by like this beautiful culture and art and passion. And I really think that is a huge thing that actually shaped music for me almost more than anything else, was just being around those types of people. So I think that was one thing. And then I was I still am like huge animal lover. So I was kind of always surrounded by all kinds of different kind of creatures. Any kind of animal you can probably imagine, I probably had at some point. So I just think kind of like the ability for my parents kind of let me do all that stuff too. Like I could bring home like this crazy creature. Like I had at one point 2 really big pythons, and they would wrap around my body. And I remember having, a high school job, and I would take my snakes to work with me, and no one knew because I would wear a hoodie, and there was like 5 foot of python wrapped around me. And one time it peeked out, and at work, the head, and somebody just went fucking crazy, like, ah! And I just like pushed her head back down, zipped it back up. But I was that kind of guy. Like I would go to school with a ferret on a leash, like, so my parents kind of let me be and let me do that kind of thing. And I think just being able to kind of be creative and free and being around these types of people, that just kind of shaped me as a human.
And as a good Italian boy, you developed a love of pizza. And we have a fan question from Tom Beanie. His question is it true that you had a wood-fired vegan pizza stand? And then we have a fan that provides a testimonial. So Doug Glusich says, yes, and it was the best pizza I ever had. And this is coming from a guy who always has meat on his pizza until I had Sal's. His pizzas were all vegan. So you have a question and a fan giving a testimonial.
Yeah, during COVID, so right before COVID, I was on tour with Bonds Mara. And the pandemic hit while we were on tour. And I remember all the shows were like great turnouts. We were so excited about it. The song went top 15. the first song we had. And we're like, people were coming out to the shows like, this is awesome. And it was so much fun. We played the show in Ottawa, and the promoter said that 70%, it was like a dead show. And we were like so bummed, like, oh my God, like what happened here in Ottawa? We were getting radio play in Ottawa. The promoter's like 70% of the ticket holders didn't show up, and I don't really know why. And I remember after the show walking outside, and there was a Shoppers Drug Mart, I believe. And we just see people coming out with an insane amount of toilet paper. And I'm just like, why are these people flying out of here with toilet paper?
That was the top currency of 2020.
Yeah. We were on tour, so we were in our own rock and roll world. We weren't really paying attention to like world affairs. And then we played another show, and it was kind of similar thing. And somebody on the tour was just like, this is like a real thing. Like there's a pandemic going on. So the tour came to an end, and it was like an indefinite hiatus. No one obviously knew at the time what's going on. As time started to go on, again, like being a creative, I need that in my life. Like it's so important. I wasn't able to do music at the time, and I'm like not the type of person that's gonna be like, okay, I'm just gonna go online now and play a show. That doesn't get me off. So my wife was just like, you love cooking and stuff. Like, let's just buy a pizza oven now, just so it's something to keep you occupied while we wait to see what can happen with touring again. So I bought a pizza oven, and I spent 6 months, if not longer, creating a dough recipe. And I mean, like, I obsess about things, and that's what I do. And I just sat there and just balancing flour and water, and I cultivated my own yeast and everything like that. And I finally got this amazing dough. And I started baking pizzas for our neighbors, and people were like, you guys got to sell this stuff. So we started a pop-up pizza business, and it went fucking crazy. We had lineups like 50, 60, like just huge lineups of people wanting to buy our pizzas, to the point where we would release a menu on a Monday, and we would be sold out for the week by Wednesday. And it would be, people would just show up Friday night, Saturday, they would have their time slots. And I was doing in 3 hours on my own, like 120 pizzas. So it just ended up being this thing, and it was just really cool. So yeah, we did it, and it was and then when I moved to Florida, we ended up actually just selling the business to somebody else. And I ended up here, and it's just something like I love to do. Like I just built a really beautiful brick pizza oven in my backyard here by our pool. And it's something I still just love to do on my own. I just love it.
And how does a good Canadian boy end up in Florida?
So during the pandemic, I was starting to feel like super suffocated. I'm a very free person. I need to be like out and doing things and like taking in, like that's a huge thing for me. And my wife knows that as well. Like it's not like an antsy thing where I get antsy. I need to like soak in inspiration. And it doesn't even matter if it's for music. It's just even like when we had the pizza business, it was just like, I needed that as well. Like I just needed to soak things in. And I started feeling where we were living, the restrictions were so tight that I wasn't able to like breathe. So I said to my wife, I was like, listen, let's just go to Florida let's winter there this year. Let's go there for like 4 months, and hopefully the pandemic will be over by then. And we're in Florida, and as soon as we got to Florida, everything was open here. And it was like the pandemic wasn't happening here. And then we started hearing back home that things were ramping up, and we were at Disney with like 50,000 people, and it was like normal. And we just started, I guess we started talking to friends back home. They were calling us. They're like, hey, we're still in lockdown and stuff. And I'm at Disney with my kids, I'm at the beach, I'm meeting people. And there was a different energy here. People weren't afraid of, I guess, what was going on. And I think for me, I felt free. That gave me a sense of freedom, and I need that. And I love being by the ocean. So, but I knew my wife wasn't interested in living in Florida, because I've talked to her years ago. I was like, I love Florida. I want to live in Florida. I want to be by the ocean. That's like something. And she was like, my family, all this kind of stuff. But then when she was here and we were here for a couple months and we started integrating, we started meeting people, she on her own, she's like, I think we should just sell our home back and sell the business. And I think we need to come here and live here. So we actually sold everything remotely and bought a place here and have not looked back since. I love back home obviously as well, and all my family's there, but I'm like a total beach bum type of dude. Like this morning I woke up, like I was telling you, our AC broke at our house. So last night I came down and slept at our beach house. First thing I did is like I walked out this morning, toes in the sand, went for a swim in the ocean. That's just kind of who I am. So that was important for me.
You were smart. You let Florida itself convince your wife to move there. You just step back
Yeah.
and you said, "Hey, do your thing, Florida," and she was all in after that.
Pretty much. And where we live in Florida too, like there's different parts of Florida. We live on the West Coast. We live by the beach. So if you come here, it's like it is chill vibes. Like it's island time. Like everyone's living kind of like on island time. Like that's the vibe of where I am. So you just feel like you're on vacation every day, and it's inspiring. And yeah, I grow lots of fruit, and I have a fruit orchard on my property here. So it's just like very with nature, you know, and I love that. I love seeing the dolphins every day. You just walk and the dolphins just flying out of the water, and you're like alligators. Like we have tons of alligators in my neighborhood, my area, and I love seeing all that stuff.
So let's dive back into the My Darkest Days timeline, but all the way at the beginning of the band. How did you find out that they were looking for a guitarist?
That's a good question. So talking about networking, as you were earlier, I was always the person in any of my bands that was the networker. I saw the value. I'm an entrepreneur as well, and I we'll talk about that later because I actually have some advice for up and coming musicians regarding this kind of thing. But I was able to separate the creative and the business of music. And everyone else I was always in bands with, they were always stumbled and stifled by the business stuff. And I saw the value in being able to like hone in and market and that kind of stuff and network. So very early on in high school, I knew all the major players I could tell you every single agent at the agency group in Toronto. I could tell you how long almost they had been there. I could tell you every agent at Feldman. I knew who they were. I knew where they came from. I knew what venues they would go to. I was just like, you know, music CIA. I was like, I just knew, I spied around. And I would always, like I said, growing up in the city, every independent band trying to make it, you know, will come to Toronto to like showcase and play. So it's very easy to keep your ear to the ground when you live in a major city like that and you're tapped into the scene. And I played a show with My Darkest Days very early on, the like original lineup of the band before Paulo. This is when Brendan's brother was the guitar player. And I remember seeing them play, and they were so much better than my band. And those guys, I believe Matt is like 6 or 7 years older than me. Because I remember when I joined the band, I think I was 20. And I think Matt was 26 or 27. So at this point, when I saw them, I might have been like 17. And they were already in their, you know, well into their 20s. So they had a lot more experience. And I remember seeing them. And I remember that night I opened for them being like, I'm going to play in that band. And I just kind of made it a point of going to their shows. And I remember when my band started to kind of a couple years down, my band started to get like a little bit of a following, independent following. Then it was like, it made sense to bring all our bands together. So My Darkest Days would say, hey, we're having a show. Do you guys want to be the support on this show? Sure. And kind of to bring things full circle, fast forward, you know, here we are a couple years later, and I'm actually where I am right now in this exact spot. Because I said before I owned this place, this kind of our beach house here, I used to rent this place with my family. And it was always a goal for me to buy this place. And because we had a family friend who owned here. And I was sitting in here with my family. It looked much different in here at the time. And I remember having my laptop, and I get like a DM, and it's from Doug, the drummer for My Darkest Days. He's like, hey man, we're thinking of having another guitar player in the band, and we want you to come out and audition. So they were auditioning lead guitar players. Paulo was in the band at the time. Paulo was fantastic. I was like, yeah, sure. So I come out, I learn a bunch of the songs that they had at the time. And I think that they liked that I was much younger than them at the time. Paulo was much older than even Matt and Doug. And Doug and Matt, I think, like I said, they were older than me. And I think they wanted, they were at the time where the deal with Island Def Jam hadn't come through just yet, and they were going to be doing more showcases. And I think they kind of wanted to bring somebody like new in, and that was more of the lead guitar player. And so my first ever show with the band was a showcase for Def Jam Records. So that was like mind-blowingly
no pressure.
No pressure.
Yeah, just a band's entire career rides on this first gig.
Just a band's, yeah, exactly. Just a band's entire career pretty much hangs on this. But it also showed to me that they believed in me and what I was doing at the time. And I remember that first show was packed. We packed that Alma Combo. Everybody in the music industry is there. And then right before our show, I see Ian Thornley walk in from Big Rack. I see Chad Kroger walk into the Alma Combo. I want to say some of the guys from Billy Talent were there too. And again, this independent band, I've never done anything like this before, playing for, major label. And that was kind of it. The deal ended up coming through shortly after that, but it was that's pretty much how it happened. It was just networking, being around the scene all the time, knowing the right people, networking with the right people, and eventually, luck, talent, and timing kind of all intersect, right? And that's pretty much how it happened.
So I was surprised when I saw that Paulo Neto was in My Darkest Days, because I know him from Thornley. I know him from Big Wreck. And then to see that he's in a third epic Canadian rock band, is like, what band hasn't this guy been in?
Paulo's amazing, by the way, man. He's so talented. I just don't think My Darkest Days was a good fit for him. As a musician, you can make things work and you can kind of make yourself fit into certain situations. But I think Paulo was at the point in his life where he was looking for something different, and he was a way better fit for other things. But I will tell you that had nothing to do with his level of talent, because he's a wildly talented person. And I remember like Paulo, at the time, like I said, I was 20, and I think Paulo was like 31 or something like that. So he was 11 years older than me. And I remember when they're like, listen, Paulo's leaving the band and we're not going to add another guitar player, so it's just going to be you now. And I had to pick up all of his vocal parts and his rhythm playing parts. And I had to adjust to that because that was not my style of playing. And I had never been a harmony singer before. So it was like a grind to kind of like, learn what he was doing, plus what they would originally hired me to do, or originally brought me in the band to do. So I remember being like, oh man, this is going to be tough. And it was, but I'm so grateful for it, because I learned a bunch of new skills I would have probably not have if I wasn't thrown into the fire.
So we have a comment sent in from a fan. This is from Judy Corbin. Judy says, I can't think of any questions, but it was a really good time at all the shows I made it to. My Darkest Days is easily the band I saw the most live shows of. 3 Days Grace comes in second. Much love, from Judy. So just a comment.
Awesome. Love that. That's awesome. Yeah, we had definitely had like fans that were super hardcore that would follow us. We had this group called the MDD Addicts. They had shirts and everything. And I remember thinking like, how do these people do it? Like, they don't have jobs. Like, they're just at every single show across America. And I thought that was so cool. So yeah, we had people like that. I love that. It's awesome.
So in 2010, you guys released the debut self-titled album, My Darkest Days. There's 3 singles: Porn Star Dancing, Move Your Body, and Every Lie. The album goes to number 3 on the Billboard Hard Rock Albums charts in the US, goes to number 11 on the Canadian album charts. So I own this album, and I remember playing it all the time. Those 3 singles to me all sounded like hit singles, if I've ever heard any before. I thought the album sounded so well recorded and so polished. It sounded like I was hearing what rock music would sound like in the future. So it sounded
Yeah.
current, but it also had kind of a future element to it because of the polish and the ear candy and some of the electronic stuff that was in there as well.
Yeah.
What do you think came together to make the album just sound so great?
I think Joey Moe was a huge part of that as well. And also, Matt was not really a guitar player. He was the Matt comes from everything as a songwriter. I do too, but I was also, in fact, I love the guitar. Whereas Matt saw the guitar as just a tool. So if you actually look at a lot of the stuff on the record, it's like guitar parts that are simple that almost sound like they're synth parts in a way. And I think that was a huge part of that kind of futuristic sound was the fact that Matt was playing guitar as not really a guitar player. And it's like my daughter the other day, she was in her bedroom and she's like, man, she's an incredible little songwriter. She's 9 years old. She'll sit for hours writing music. And she's self-taught. She's kind of like me where she has to seek out direction on her own timing, but she's not like, I gave her a guitar and she will just fiddle around with it on her own. And the other day, she actually came up with a riff, like as a non-guitar player. And I'm just watching her, how she's like clumping through this riff, but it was so sick that I was just like, can I borrow that? Like I took out my guitar and I like refined it just a little bit. And I actually sent it to Lucas. And I was like, listen to this riff. I was like, we got to use this. Like, give Willow some writing credits on this one. But I think that's where Matt came from. And I think then Joey Moe was really good at kind of, polishing the sound. Because if you listen to My Darkest Days, pre-Joey Moe, pre-Chad, it was a lot more grungy. And I think Joey was able to kind of refine it a little bit and give it more of a futuristic type vibe.
Your daughter wrote like the next Papa Roach Last Resort type guitar riff.
Man, yeah, like she's so cool. I'm like, I wish I was as cool as you when you were a kid. Well, she's got like amazing style too. I'll give you like a quick little sidebar. This is a funny story that I just love. She like loves to perform, and last year or the year before, do you know who Desmond Child is at all?
Yep.
Yeah, he's like probably I don't know. I would say he's probably the biggest songwriter of the last maybe 100 years. Like he's written every single hit, Living on a Prayer.
A lot of like pop and R&B hits, right?
Pop, art, rock. He wrote pretty much Kiss's hits, Bon Jovi, Katy Perry. He's a massive songwriter. Look him up. He's written pretty much everything you can imagine. And we went to his Christmas party at his, he has a place, this ridiculous place overlooking Central Park in Manhattan. And we got invited to his Christmas party. We went to it, and it's just like all these music industry people. And there's his huge grand piano there that he's written all these mega hits on. And there's this kind of, there's a piano there playing away. And my daughter, Willow, she's just like, I want to go sing. And I'm like, go for it. So I was like, Desmond, is it cool if she gets, and sings? And she just went there and belted it out like she owned the place. And so, yeah, she's like that type of person. So I love that about her. But she's got like really cool creative ideas. So I was like, hey, you never know, Shaq. I might be knocking on her door to help me with some music in the future. She's got it.
Do you remember the first time hearing your music on the radio? Was it Porn Star Dancing, or did you get some radio play with your bands before that?
I had radio play with my bands before that. My Darkest Days did as well because they won the Rock Search in St. Catharines. They had, I don't know if you remember that. It was St. Catharines Rock Station, 97.7. They used to have this thing.
It was Every Lie, right? That won that competition?
Yes, it did. Every Lie won that competition. But hearing Porn Star Dancing on the radio, actually, the very first time we heard Porn Star Dancing finished, I think was actually even a cooler moment. We were playing a show in Barrie, Ontario. Again, we were signed, the music was done, but no one knew who we were yet. This was before the music video. We got a show. Oh my God, there was a band. It was Edwin and some of the and
Crash
Jeff
Karma?
from the Tea Party. Crash Karma. We were opening for Crash Karma. And I remember we get to the show in Barrie, and this is this little venue. And I remember when we get there, we get an email, and it's the ludicrous version of the song, and we had not heard it yet. And so we were like, oh my God, we gotta listen to this right now. And it was just like Crash Karma was doing a sound check. We waited until I think they were done. We just, when everything was quiet, we play it and we just hear Ludacris's vocal on this. And we're like, this is gonna be crazy. And fast forward a couple months later, I don't remember hearing it on the radio for the first time. It was kind of like it all just happened at once. It's like when it happened, it was just everywhere in the world that we were in. Wherever we were going, if we were touring, we were on the road, we'd always have the rock stations playing on the tour bus. And it's like it was on the radio all the time. So I don't remember the first time hearing it on the radio, but I remember the first time hearing it completed. And it was at that show with Crash Karma.
We've talked about Porn Star Dancing going to #1. The other two singles, Move Your Body and Every Lie, were both top 25 hits on the Billboard mainstream rock charts in the US. You did all these crazy tours throughout your time with My Darkest Days. So there's 3 Days Grace, Default, Theory of a Dead Man, Nickelback, Hinder, Trapped Bush, Seether, Skillet, Papa Roach. When you think to all those amazing bands, are there any stories that come to you that are entertaining or worth sharing, or favorite memories from your time on the road with those bands?
There is so many. I'll tell you, the funnest tours I ever did were with Hinder. Those guys are just hilarious, and we had like an amazing time. Like every time I see Cody, the drummer for Hinder, he doesn't understand why I find this story so funny, but I love this story. They had the guitar player for Hinder, his name was Blower, and he was always known for just doing the craziest things. Like you would go backstage and there'd be like a crowd of people. You're like, what's Blower doing? And you'd see him and he'd have his nuts hanging out and spraying hairspray on his nuts, and he'd light a match and just and like they would always be something like that was always going on. You would know because you would see their crew run backstage, and sometimes it would be during our sound check before showing. I put down my guitar, but I need to go see what the hell is happening over here. Always crazy stuff. But there was one night we used to spend a lot of time on each other's buses, and I think one night a couple times I rode with Hinder and stayed on their bus, and because we were so communal with each other. And there was one night it was me, Cody, and Blower, and we were sitting in the lounge of the tour bus. And I just asked Blower, I was like, we'd have a rider every night, and part of the rider was you could just kind of ask for whatever you want, booze, whatever, wine, food. The promoter had given us so much gum. Like it was an insane, like thousands of pieces of gum. So I said, Blower, what are we gonna do with all this gum? And I was like, let's see how many pieces of gum we could fit in your mouth. And I just kept stuffing little pieces of gum in Blower's mouth till like he looked like a squirrel. I'd never seen such a big wad of gum. But I don't know, it was like stuff like that, like just funny, like kind of innocent things that like that just to keep ourselves occupied. I used to love when we used to tour together with those guys too, and the tour buses used to have to gas up, and we'd go to like a truck stop at like 2 a.m, and then all the bands just like walk out of the tour buses together, and we would just raid the gas station for snacks and stuff like that, and just be throwing stuff at each other, just stuff like that. Like I love those memories. But I have a memory of playing. We did some tour dates with Stone Temple Pilots when Scott Weiland was in the band still, and man, I remember seeing those guys play for the first time, and I think that was the very first time I was genuinely starstruck. And mind you, by that point, we had played with way bigger bands than even Stone Temple Pilots were at the time. But there was just something about those guys. I remember them just walking past, and he was out of worldly. Like you would meet like a lot of celebrities, on this journey, and you're like, oh yeah, I know him from so and so, even if they were big. But there was something about Scott Weiland that was just different. And I vividly remember that him just walking up on stage, walking past him, like, holy shit, it's Scott Weiland. Like
he was the epitome of a rock star.
Yeah, but he was even so much more than that. It was like he wasn't from this planet. And like I said, like at that point I had already met Slash. I'd met my idols, I didn't get, and Slash, obviously I don't want to like downplay Slash is Slash. He's a legend. But there was something about Scott Weiland that was just like, who is this person? Like, it's like he's out of this world, you know? So, yeah. And I also remember on that tour, there was a night, myself, Gavin Rosdale, singer of Bush, and Shim, the singer for Sick Puppies, we were sitting side stage at another show together. We walked on at the same time right before Stone Temple Pilots were playing. I remember all of us just looking at each other being like, damn, they're good. Like, they were so good. So the whole band was just insane. Yeah.
When I was 14, I got both my ears pierced and I bleached my hair blonde. And I remember my
Nice.
parents being like, what is happening? And my dad and I did a road trip to New York State and we saw Fishbone open for Stone Temple Pilots, open for Red Hot Chili Peppers, talking about a
Oh,
few bands you love here. And
holy.
when Scott Weiland gets on stage with Stone Temple Pilots,
Yeah.
he's there with, he's like this lizard man rock
Yeah.
star on stage,
Snake.
and he has the bleach blonde hair and he has the
Oh,
two
yeah.
earrings. And I go, see, Dad, other people have it. And he's like, this is your example that's supposed to
Yeah.
convince me, this lizard looking rock star drug addict slithering around on stage. That's what's supposed to
Yeah.
convince me that normal people do this. I'm like, okay, maybe that
Yeah.
was a bad example.
Yeah. Maybe it was a bad example. Oh, man, that would have been a killer show to see. That would have been awesome.
It was awesome and it was super loud. And then at the point where they get off stage and they're preparing to bring out the Chili Peppers, more speakers drop down from the ceiling. And my dad goes, oh my God, it's going to get
Oh,
louder than
God.
Stone Temple Pilots.
Oh my God, that's crazy. No, it's true. Yeah, they were a loud band too. Yeah, I remember that too. That watching them, like, holy shit, they're loud.
After you guys released the debut My Darkest Days album, you guys get nominated for a Juno for New Group of the Year. What did that
Mhm.
Juno nomination mean to you? That's Canada's Grammys. That's a big deal.
It was a big deal. I remember. There's a funny story to go with that too, if you want to hear that. But we get the nomination. I remember thinking, like, wow, like, that's pretty crazy. And I will objectively say, and again, I'll be completely objective because, like, I'm pretty good at being like, we shouldn't have got that. We should have won that Juno. At the time, I believe we ended up losing to a band that sold 5,000 copies of their album, but they had sold it riding their bikes across the country, which is pretty cool. But at that point, we had kind of gotten gold in the States and platinum in Canada, and we had, like, there was a part of me that, like, and a lot of Canadian musicians will talk about this too. Sometimes there's kind of this, when you make it in America, it's almost kind of like you've strayed from your
Canada
home.
holds it against you.
Yeah, and there are other Canadian bands that will talk about this. Like, if you are just big in Canada, you will get the royal treatment. And we did, until we started veering off into America and then spending the majority of our time in America. I felt like, how could we have not won that? It was just like, we had out of that entire category, we had the most sales across the board, and we were doing some crazy things. So, but the nomination itself was like, wow, I actually have it in my home. Like, it's, the nomination right there. Cause I think that it's like, it was so cool to be able to have that. But the funny thing was, the way we showed up to the Juno Awards was, we had a show in Boise, Idaho, two days before, the day before the Junos. And we were supposed to play the show, get on a flight, fly to Toronto, I think it was, with the Junos that year, and attend the whole ceremony and everything. And the day before, we're in Boise, Idaho, and it's snowing, and I wake up to Matt in my bunk, and I'm on my side. And our bus driver said he saw a deer, which is questionable. We're not really sure if he actually saw a deer or something else happened. And the bus flipped over on the highway, and it landed, thank God, on the side in a huge snowbank. So snow kind of like impacted the flip, and we just slid across, the highway. And I remember seeing Doug fly out of his bunk completely naked. And we had just hired this personal assistant. Her name was Juice. It was like her third day on the job. And Dougie landed on her, spread eagle, completely naked. He got injured. He was limping. So we showed up. Dougie was to the Junos. Dougie had a cane and everything like that. So I remember the Junos mainly because of that incident that happened before. But it was fun, and it was really cool to obviously be like you said, it's the kind of Canadian version of the Grammys. To kind of have that as part of your history was also pretty cool.
Were you more traumatized by the bus crash or by Doug's nude moment?
I would say Doug's nude moment, just because I was like, man, she's not going to come back now. Like, it's done. Like, it is. But she roughed it out for a little bit longer, so I was grateful for that.
This episode has been brought to you by the Women in the Music Industry podcast. It's hosted by music producer Rob Wells, who has worked with global superstars like Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, and Selena Gomez. Through his 1-hour interviews, he shines a spotlight on the remarkable women who are breaking barriers and making their mark in the music industry. Some of his notable guests include Morgan Lander of the multi-million selling metal band Kitty, and Pam Shane, who co-wrote Genie in a Bottle for Christina Aguilera. If you're a fan of the Joel Martin Mastery podcast, you'll love the Women in the Music Industry podcast, which is available on all platforms. So in 2012, you guys released the follow-up album, Sick and Twisted Affair. So there's 2 singles, Casual Sex and Sick and Twisted Affair. Casual Sex is a top 25 hit on the mainstream rock charts in the US for Billboard. And then Sick and Twisted Affair was a top 40 hit. The album debuts at number 9 in the US on the rock album charts. Did you guys feel a ton of pressure with this album having to follow up the success of the last album and Porn Star Dancing?
Totally. And I think that's what Casual Sex kind of was, but it just wasn't as strong a song overall. But honestly, man, I'll tell you, it didn't really matter. It was like the band, and still, like, if you look at the band's Spotify numbers today, which I didn't today, but if you probably look, we're still averaging over 2 million listeners monthly on Spotify alone. If that band took on I don't know, it's just like the fans were going to come out whether we had more hit songs or not. That's what it felt like. People just loved, I think, the folklore, again, of the band. And we were, as much as we had radio hits, we were also a word of mouth band because we had a lot of fun at our shows. There was a part of the shows where we would bring up as many girls from the audience on stage as possible, to the point where you felt like the stage was going to collapse. So I just think that it didn't even matter if we had more of Porn Star Dancing type hits. People loved being around us. And we noticed that second album, we were bigger than we were on the first album. And we were headlining tours of our own and selling out venues. And it was successful. There was a lot of pressure, though, to write hits, because when you're signed to a major label, that's what it's always all about, right? It's like hits. And I think that's a shame in a way. And that's the hard thing sometimes about being on a label, is there is that pressure, timelines, deadlines. And I think that can kind of hinder the process sometimes. They say you have your whole life to write your first album and then 6 months to write your next, I know Matt probably felt a lot of pressure as well. But we all did, because we all wanted to contribute and we all wanted to do something great. And we didn't want it to end, So yeah, there was a lot of pressure for that, but I've also learned from that experience as well, and how to just sometimes say no. I've kind of learned that now, but yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
You had a few heavy hitters that joined in on the album. You had John 5, you had Barry Stock from 3 Days Grace. How did they become involved in the project?
Honestly, I think John 5, and I could be wrong about this, but I think John 5 got into the project through James Michael of 6 a.m. I think that's how John got on. And then I'm playing on one of the songs. And then Barry, we had such a close relationship with 3 Days Grace, obviously. So that was never like, oh man, I wonder if Barry's going to play on the song. It's like, it's Barry. He's totally going to play on the song because he loves us and we love him. And maybe he didn't feel that way, but that's how we felt. He felt about us, kind of thing. So, and Barry's obviously incredible and sweetest person in the world. So, yeah, that's how it kind of came to be with those guys. And then Orianthi, Michael Jackson's guitar player, came on a song called Set It On Fire. Yeah, we were like collaborative. We loved having kind of different people feature on, and it just kind of broadens your audience a little bit. So yeah, it was cool.
The album featured an awesome cover of Stutter from Joe. When did you guys first start playing that song, and how did you end up choosing that cover to be on the album?
That was like I think we were doing that cover of Stutter before the first album. It was just it was just sometimes like after the like we'd be playing a song, and if it shared a similar chord progression, sometimes Matt would just start singing another song, and Stutter was one of those songs. I think that kind of came from that, if I can recall. um, it might have been another hip hop song, because Matt would do that quite a bit, but it just sounded so natural. And when we played that live, people loved it. So we're like, we got to record this, because even on the first tours that we did, we played Stutter as a cover, and people loved it. So yeah, I think it just became one of those things that we should record that. And actually, it's funny because I don't really listen to My Darkest Days ever anymore. Like, I don't go back and listen to the records. But a couple months ago, I was like, I had just like a craving to listen to Stutter. I just loved it. So put it on. I was like, oh, this is cool.
You guys had songs in the movie Saw 3D and in the video game
Mm-hmm.
NHL 13. What was it like to experience your music in those mediums?
Man, that is cool. Like, yeah, like I said, it's really cool to see your music kind of go different places. Um, but it was like beyond that, even like we have, friends, people come up and be like, I heard your song from a video game. And to me, that was wild. It was like, man, not even from the radio, from a video game, you heard this song and now you're at a show. I always thought that was so cool. I remember being in Toronto on a day off again, flew back home. I was with my girlfriend at the time. And I'm like, what's going on in the city today? And she's like, oh, there's like a bodybuilding convention, down the street. So I was like, let's go. So we just kind of go. And the second we walk into the bodybuilding convention, there's like a bunch of girls flexing, doing their thing, and porn star dancing's just blaring through the entire convention center. And I'm just like looking around. I'm like, the timing couldn't have been more perfect. So there's like cool stuff like that. Like, you hear a song in different places like that. And a funny one was this was actually a couple of years ago. This is kind of relatively recently. I think it was just like during COVID. My wife was like in the bathtub and she was watching this documentary on Netflix. I can't remember what documentary it is. And it was like, it was talking about like how women are portrayed in media and culture and all that stuff. And she was just like, I remember she's watching the documentary. She's like, Sal, this documentary is amazing. You gotta watch. I'm gonna send this to your mother. I'm sending this to your sisters to watch. It's so good. And then she kind of comes out of the bathroom. She's like, you're not gonna fucking believe it. I'm like, what? She's like, they played the porn star dancing music video in this documentary I'm watching in a really negative light. So I'm totally not sending it to your mom and your sisters now. So it'd be funny. You'd see stuff like that as well. But no, we always said like no strippers were harmed in the filming, the making of that music video. Everyone wanted to be there and to be a part of it. So, but anyways, it's cool to see your music in kind of different places, things you've been a part of. Yeah, it's cool. Hockey games, you'd be at a hockey game and Move Your Body would start playing at a Maple Leafs game, and you'd be like in the arena going, well, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
In 2013, it gets announced that you've left My Darkest Days, that you are going to
Yeah.
venture out on your own. You're going to start your own band. At what point did you decide that it was time to leave?
I knew from day one I wasn't going to be there full time. I knew it wouldn't be able to last for me. I loved the music, loved the music. I loved what did on stage together. I loved being in a hit band. I loved, being able to be the guy in that band, like I loved it all. However, I lived a completely different lifestyle. I think that really clashed with, at the time, Matt. And not that how I perceive things or the way I like to live and exist is better than his. It has nothing to do with that at all. But I just think we clashed a lot. And that was hard for me because when you're in a band, you spend more time with your band members than you do your wife or anybody. Like, you guys are together 24/7. So there has to be a synergy outside of the music that can carry you through the tours. And I always felt like the odd man out in the band. And I was. And like I said, not because I'm like, putting my nose up at anybody. I'm a different type of person. And I think also a big part of it was they were all from the same town. They were all from Norwood. They all grew up together. They had this, different type of bond and upbringing than I think I did. And so I was the outsider coming in. I was the outsider the entire way through. And at some point, I just looked at everything and I was like, man, like, when I set out to do music, I wanted a #1 song. I wanted a platinum record. I wanted to be nominated for a Juno. Those were things I wanted when I set out music from high school. And I was like, I achieved all of that. And I said, so now my musical journey has to be about something else, And I wasn't getting the other side of what I needed from the band, the camaraderie. And so I just felt like it was my time to go. And so I ended up leaving the band. And obviously, I don't think Matt was expecting it. And they were upset, obviously. And there was a lot that kind of came from that. You probably saw when I was on my honeymoon, there was like, we were supposed to have like an announcement together that I was leaving and have an official press release. And, they kind of released that we're never getting married. And I don't know, it was distasteful. But again, I don't hold anything against them. It was like such a long time ago, and people grow and whatever. I grew since then. And I can assume that they did too. And I still communicate with the band members as well. So it's like, it's not, I haven't talked to Matt so much in the last handful of years, but Reed will touch base. Dougie will touch base. Brendo once in the blue moon. So I still love them. That's the other thing too. I love those guys. It has nothing to do with that. It was just, there's some people that you can love, but maybe not want to spend a lot of time with, if that makes sense. Everyone's grown up since then, so it would be different now. But at that time, that's how I felt. I love you guys, but I need to go.
Well, as an outsider that's looking at it objectively, you could see that there's a few things that are different. You're from a different city, you're younger, you've changed your lifestyle. Yes. So it's like not everything is congruent anymore.
Exactly. And that I felt very hard because I started getting to holistic living and stuff on those tours. And it was really hard. Like, we were, again, like kind of saying, like, having to hold up the image. We're this party band endorsed by Jaeger Monster Energy drink, everything that is, and I'm like juicing, before a show, and like, I just found it hard for me to kind of like keep that up. So, yeah.
So in 2014, you formed Smashing Satellites. For our loyal podcast listeners that listen to every single episode, regardless of who the guest is, how would you describe the music for Smashing Satellites?
It was more like eclectic. That album for me was just like something that I wanted to just get out creatively. It was more like a painting, there was songs for sure. Like, we had two songs in the top 40 in Canada, one in the States with that project. But for me, it was more just like, I wanted to paint this really cool picture. Like, my favorite song in the album is a song called Calm Me Down. And it's like an eclectic mix of like electronic and rock and kind of classic rock. It's just kind of what I wanted to make at the time. Yeah, I don't know how to really explain it, but I guess if it had to have a home, it was probably alternative rock. Yeah.
So we have a fan question about that song, Calm Me Down. This is from Thomas Devias. His question is, there's an unreleased guitar solo from Smashing Satellite song, Calm Me Down. Will it be released? Another question, what instrument have you never played but want to include on a song?
Oh, cool. I don't know. It's funny that he remembered that, because I kind of remember there being a different solo for Calm Me Down. There was. And I think we wanted one that I had like more of like a very shreddy kind of like crazy solo. And then we ended up going with the one that is on that record. But I think we were planning to release another version of it, which we never did. Um, so I don't know if that'll ever be released. And I'd have to call the producer and be like, hey, do you even still have that? Probably does. Um, and then an instrument that I never have had on a song. Oh, that's interesting.
You said maybe one that you don't even play, like just maybe an instrument you love that.
That I don't play. I would love to actually, in the studio, I've had, um, there was a guitar that I would play in the studio that it looked like a guitar, but when you played it, it sounded like a sitar. But I think it'd be really cool to actually have a real sitar on a song. But that's like something you'd have to really learn how to play. But I think that'd be super cool.
We have a fan comment from Adam Senna. His comment is, Sal has one of the most fantastic voices. So just something I thought you'd like to hear.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, I would disagree, but I appreciate that too. And it's, like after spending some time in the studio this last couple weeks, I've, with Lucas, that guy has a freaking voice, man. It's like my wife was always just like, she's like, why don't you just continue fronting your own stuff? I'm just like, I want to find somebody that can sing way better than I can. I can hit the notes, but yes, so I appreciate that very much. Thanks.
When you say Lucas, you're talking about Lucas Rossi, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Lucas Rossi. Yeah.
We'll talk about him in a little bit. There's some
Sure.
stuff going on there we'll touch on in a bit. What's the story behind the band name Smashing Satellites?
As we are kind of talking about, I think before we started rolling on the podcast, like I hate a lot of modern technology. I think for like medical stuff, it's freaking amazing. What they can do with, like at this point, like somebody can lose their arm, and, we have the technology to do all kinds of stuff with stuff that Elon Musk is doing with, going to replace people's vision who've been blind to be able to see. I mean, that's incredible. But I hate like where technology has gone in terms of like communication. Um, and I mean, like, now if I call somebody, they'll text me and I'll be like, but I called you, like, answer your phone. Back in the day, like, I call somebody with an answer. I was born in 1986, so I remember, cell phones being introduced and computers being introduced. And as a kid, I grew up during school break, summer break, everybody in the neighborhood would be outside playing. It'd be like 20 of us, like a gang, a little posse playing, biking, whatever. You go outside now, you don't see anybody. Like, kids don't do that anymore. Everyone's like playing, they're like talking to their friends through a video game. And I don't want to dog on that, because like maybe there is a lot of value to that. But I just kind of see the world is perceived to becoming so much more connected. But I think on a spiritual level, we're actually becoming way more disconnected. And I think there's a lot of unnecessary stuff that comes from that too. People might read a text message wrong, and if it was just a person on the phone, they would have perceived it completely different. And I just think that, so when I was looking for a band name, when I look at where the world is, I kind of just see like these giant satellites kind of starting to take over, everything being controlled by that. And I just had this just smashing them all down. So it's kind of Smashing Satellites kind of came from that.
And you guys recorded with Hinder drummer Cody Hansen?
So originally, when I left My Darkest Days, 2013, 2014, that there was a year where I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I was just writing on my own. And like I said, I was really close with the Hinder guys, and Cody had reached out to me at one point, and he's like, "Why don't you come to Oklahoma? Just live at my house, and for a while, and let's just write." And I feel so indebted to Cody for that, because he completely, when at a time where I was kind of very vulnerable, because you have to kind of imagine, like, I left My Darkest Days not when it started to peter out. I left My Darkest Days at the peak of where we were and going to the next level. And so it wasn't like I left him like, oh, okay, like, the band ran its course, what's next? It was very much like I left at the peak. What do I do now? So when I kind of Cody kind of took me in. We just started writing and writing and writing, and we just kind of got everything I was feeling at that time into music. And him and Marshall, who's now the singer for Hinder, we collaborated on honestly some amazing songs that aren't even on some of the Smashing Satellites records that I would love to get out in the future. They're such great songwriters. So that's how honestly Smashing Satellites started. In my perfect world at that time, I would have loved for them to be my band members as well. But they sparked the whole thing for me. And I had a couple of those songs before it was even called Smashing Satellites. It was just me. And at one point, I think Cody actually asked me to fill in for Hinder as the singer. And I was just kind of doing at that time, like I said, I just didn't really know what the hell I wanted to do. So I kind of just continued making music until eventually I ended up hooking up with Bob Marlette. He's a Grammy award-winning, Grammy nominated producer, done a lot of huge records. And Bob kind of did the same thing. He's like, why don't you live with me in LA for a bit? He's like, I have a guest area. He's just like, we'll just record. And he housed me to kind of give me the space to kind of just go into the studio every day and record. And eventually the record deal came through the songs I did with both Cody and Bob.
Bob has actually come up in a bunch of the interviews that I've done. So
oh, nice.
Man, he's worked with Saliva and Black Sabbath and Rob Zombie and Marilyn Manson. He's like a monster producer in the industry.
He's not only a big producer, he's done the songs from all of those bands too. Like the first big Shinedown record, first big Seether record. He's done like some of the first big Saliva record and stuff. Like he's done the records. So, and Bob was like, I loved working with Bob too. He's just so chill. And again, Bob was another one of those encouraging people that's just like, you're going to do this, buddy. We're going to make this happen. So yeah, it was cool.
If the video game Guitar Hero requested just one Smashing Satellite song to be featured in the game that fans could play, what song would you choose?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I had a song called Benny, and it's really heavy and like kind of like thrashy. There's not a complicated guitar solo in it. It's actually rather simple, but I think it's got like a good energy to it. I would probably say that song. That would be a fun one to play.
So we have some kind words sent in from Trevor T-Rock McNeven. So this is from 1,000 Foot Crutch from FM Static. And this is what Trevor says. He says, Sal is a beast. It was an honor to get to know him better on tour with his other band, Smashing Satellites. Anyone who knows Sal loves him. I love that he's a family man first, outside of being such a weapon of a guitarist and vocalist. He gives it all in whatever he puts his hand to, whether it's performing, writing, playing, loving his audience and family, or other entrepreneurial ventures. He always struck me as a really healthy, well-balanced guy who has a piece about him that you can't miss. What a beauty inside and out. So that's from Trevor.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, he's an awesome dude. Like I told you, I love Trevor, and he's a super awesome guy, and that's very kind words of him. He's awesome. I love that guy.
In 2016, 2017, you have a story about a time where you almost died because of Jason from Friday the 13th. What is this story?
This is true. So I was actually in LA working with Bob Marlette at his studio. And one thing we would do, and so when and I was living in LA, I was living in LA for like a year and a half between making the records and, writing and stuff. You run into everybody. It's, especially like just outside of Los Angeles in the Valley. A lot of people live in the Valley. I would be at like Guitar Center, and Nick Lovin from, Pineapple Express would be there trying to buy a keyboard because he was starting a band. So you're connecting with all these random people all the time. So every day or every time we'd finish the song, Bob would do a rough mix and we would do the car test. Car test is we'd get in the car together and go and drive and just listen in the car and see what it sounds like in an average system and not a multi-million-dollar studio, right? Because that's important. So this day, Bob did not come with me. I took my own car, and he's just like, just go drive and listen and see, see what you're feeling. So I'm kind of just driving, through the mountains in LA and in California there. And I'm just getting so into the music. And I'm like, not really thinking. I'm driving, but you know, when you're kind of on autopilot, you're just, you know, I'm not focused on everything else except for the music. I get back and I walk into the studio, and Bob's studio was like right here. His house was on the property here. So and there was like a walkway between the studio and the home. So I go into the studio first, and I'm like, Bob, I like love the mix. And we start walking out of the studio, and we can hear in the house a door just slam, like hard, like somebody's pissed off kind of slam. Not like, oh, by accident I shut the door too hard, like hard enough that if there was glass on the door, it would have probably just broke. And Bob and me immediately look at each other. He's just like, walks in. He's like, hello? Who's there? And we walk into the kitchen, and there's this man standing there. And he's like fucking huge and old, like in his 70s. And we're just like, I'm just thinking, who is this guy? And he's like looking right at me. And at the time, I didn't know Bob knew this person to some degree, but I could tell Bob, as soon as when Bob saw him, Bob knew there was going to be some type of trouble. The guy walks up to me and he's like, I'm going to fucking kill you. And I'm like, whoa, what do you mean? So Bob's like getting in between us. Like, listen, I know this guy, like, he would have never done anything to upset you. He's like, he almost fucking killed me. He almost ran me off the fucking road. He almost drove me off a fucking mountain or whatever. I'm like, what? Apparently, at some point while I was listening to this mix, I cut this person off really bad. And he starts to really get into my face, and Bob breaks it up and starts to push him up the door, shuts the door, locks the door. And he's like, you know who that was? I'm like, no. He's like, that was the original Jason from Friday the 13th. He's my neighbor. And he's this like, and he would have actually fought you even at this age, you know? So I thought that it was always pretty funny. I was just like, I called my wife. I was like, if I died, I was like, how epic would that have been? You know, if I got stabbed by Jason, I mean, that's a good way for the kids to be like, that's how my dad died. You know, he was killed. They're like, you mean on the movie set?
That would be on
the
tombstone for sure.
Yeah, on the tombstone. So I don't know, I always thought that was like a pretty funny thing, and Bob will remember that too. It was just hilarious. He was actually John Wayne's stunt double as well, so it was funny. It was pretty cool.
That's amazing. So that brings us all the way to Bonds of Mara. How did you meet the other members, and where did the idea of starting a band together? This was basically a super group.
Yeah. So pretty much what happened with that was I took some time off from Smashing Satellites, and I had a little bit of time to breathe and kind of think what I wanted to do next. We rewind to the My Darkest Days era. You remember us opening up for Default. 2012, 2013, Default actually opened up for My Darkest Days on our US tour. And I had a chance to actually spend a lot of time with the Default guys. Loved those guys, still love those guys to this day. But me and Dave connected immediately on that tour. Like, I remember Dave is like a huge fan of 80s metal. Like, even obscure 80s bands that you've never heard of, he was like so into it. And I remember I was sitting on the tour bus right now, and we were talking about music. And he's talking about, you know, bands that he liked. And I told him about an 80s band that I opened for as an independent artist before I was in My Darkest Days. And he looked at me like I had toured with Michael Jackson. Like I told him that. Like, to him, that was the most epic thing. And I always thought that was so funny, because it was like there was like 20 people at this show. But Dave would have been, if that tour came through Vancouver and he was living there, Dave would have been at that show. And Dave's that guy that's just like, it doesn't have to be cool right now. He just, if he loves it, he's there. He's a fan. I love Dave. He's a fan. He's one of the, he's a musician and a well-known musician, but he's just a total fan at the same time and stuff. And so between that, and then also I remember seeing Dave play when I was an independent artist recording an album in Vancouver. He jumped on stage with this independent band. And I just remember how much he rocked the stage. And I just loved watching him every night play. So I kind of felt like it was time to do something again. And I was just like, I'm going to call Dave. So I called Dave, and Dave wasn't default, had not kind of done it, wasn't doing anything. I said, dude, I was like, I love you. I think you're an amazing bass player. I'm thinking of starting a project. Would you be into it? And he's like, yeah, totally. So I said, I'm going to try and rally some other troops and let's get together. I've been writing. I have some cool ideas. And the next person I actually reached out to was Brian Byrne from My Mother Earth, who I was a huge fan of. And as soon as I called Brian, he's like, I'm in. I'm like, oh, this is great. We got guitar, bass player, got singer. I'm on the guitar. And I was like, who could play drums? And the first person I was just like, I actually had thought of at first was Jack Irons, who's the original drummer for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, was the drummer for Pearl Jam, and was the drummer for the Wallflowers. And I actually reached out to him, and I actually have this, remember this vividly because I was in the bathtub and my phone rang because I think I texted him or whatever, and it was Jack. And again, I'm a huge Chili Peppers fan. So we start talking right away. And we just kind of got into talking about the Chili Peppers right away because he had just toured with the Chili Peppers. The Chili Peppers brought him on tour with his drumming solo project. He just plays drums and does all this cool stuff. And he was talking about, he's like, you know, Flea came out and I asked me to go on the tour. So we're talking about the Chili Peppers, the history of the Chili Peppers and being in the band. So he agreed to play on some of the songs, and he killed it. But when it came time to being like a touring thing, he's like, I just don't think I want to be on tour right now. So I thought of other people that I love, and I called Rich, the drummer for Finger 11. And so Rich ended up being the drummer for the project until he was in his green card process, and he had some visa issues, so he couldn't come across the border. And the song was starting to chart, and we weren't able to get him to come out, unfortunately. And that's when Dave said, hey, I got this friend from, back in the day, his name's Daryl. We should call him. And we called him, and he ended up being the drummer. And that's kind of how it kind of came together. It was a lot of fun, man. We literally, with those guys, we just never stopped laughing. It was the most fun I think I'd ever had playing in a band, for sure.
I've had Rich on the podcast twice. I have the album here in his honor. And the longest interview I've ever done on the podcast was with Rich. We did a 3.5-hour interview. This was probably about 3 years ago. Oh, I was going to mention the snare sound on the drums for the Wallflowers One Headlight. That's like my favorite recorded snare. Whenever I'm in the car, I crank that, and that snare has so much snap to it. So I don't know if that's the drummer you're talking about, but that snare is amazing.
I love that. I love that record. Yeah, Jack is he's amazing, man. I mean, he's so cool too. He's just a nice dude as well. Yeah, he's awesome.
We have a fan question from Rick O'Shea. The question is, I'm curious what first drew you to Brian as the front man for the band? So Brian Byrne, this guy, Rick O'Shea, is a huge I Mother Earth fan.
Well, so before I even called Dave, before I called anybody and I had the vision for the band, being a Chili Peppers fan, I wanted something that was going to be very organic, and that wasn't going to be the kind of generic, straightforward rock sound that was happening at that time, or even at this time now, where it's very new. It's almost like rock now is almost like new metal in a way, but it's not. It's got that super oversaturated guitars, super saturated guitar riffs. I wanted something that was going to be rock, but more funky and cool. And I was like, who would be able to sing that and like that? And then I just remember the Summertime in the Void music video. And there was always something about Brian in that video. He's also kind of that slinky, kind of snaky, kind of and I was like, oh, maybe Brian would be cool for this too. He's got that vibe where he's not just this stoic rock guy, like an Avenged Sevenfold singer or like a James Hetfield. He's got that Scott Weiland type vibe almost. And I was like, oh, he'd be perfect. So that's how I kind of thought about Brian. But what we did at first is, since me and Dave were the kind of originals of this, it started with me, called Dave. I met Dave in Vancouver, and we just said, let's do this after I called Brian. So let's all of us just get together in a room, into a studio, and just jam and see if it works. And if it doesn't, we try it, and it was cool to just hang out with each other. And if it does, then we'll see what happens. So I think there's a picture of us on day one. We all flew into Vancouver and into Abbotsford, actually. And we went to Danny Craig's studio, drummer for Default. And we all just met up there, and we just hung out in the studio, and we just, boom, it just started flowing. We were like laughing and writing music, and it just worked. And I've always loved Brian's voice, and it was perfect for what we were doing.
When I was 14, my family did a road trip to BC for a family reunion. And at the start of the road trip, we went into HMV in a mall, and I had a CD Walkman, and I had the money to buy two albums. And I bought Blink 182 Enema of the State, and I bought I Mother Earth Blue Green Orange. So
Nice.
for this
Yeah.
days long road trip, I only have two albums, they're 40 minutes each. I can only rotate through two albums. So I Mother Earth Blue Green Orange was one of them.
I love that, man. Again, another, like, my sister being the music fan she was, I wore out a lot of those CDs that she had. A lot of, like, she loved I Mother Earth too. So I had those records. And that's funny because, you know, they saw me as their peer, but again, I'm so much younger than Dave. Dave's 10 or 12 years older than me, maybe more. Yeah, Dave's, I think, 12 or 13 years older than me, 12 years older than me. And Brian, same thing. So I'm calling them, and they're listening to me as their peer, and, they respected me. But I don't think they remember, or they really knew that, like, I had their records and I was huge fans of them. So for me, I loved it. I got to play with, guys that I grew up listening to, and now we're in the same band together. So I always had, and that's happened to me in a few different situations. And you have to pinch yourself when that happens. They're looking at you as an equal now, but you're looking at them as, like, I listened to your stuff when I was a kid. So yeah.
So you guys went from Brian Byrne to Brian Crouch, which is
Yes.
awesome. You're just claiming all the amazing Brians in Canada. And
We had to have the best Brian.
my band way back in the day, in 2006 and 2008, we opened for Hail the Villain. So that's Brian Crouch was the singer. Man, that guy, we're talking about Scott Wayland on stage. He was like the reincarnation of that. You just couldn't take your eyes off of him. Like, he was
No.
just so magnetic up there and such a front man. Is that what drew you to him for this project?
Yeah. So Brian Byrne was who I saw really for the project. And Brian had something crazy to happen in his life, and so he had to depart. And honestly, like, a piece of me died when Brian had to leave, Brian Byrne, because Brian to me was my vision of what the band was supposed to be. And when me and Dave were like, this can't end. We have been having way too much fun doing this. And, like, our first song went top 15 in the country. Like, that's pretty damn good. Kids, we had no label. We did this completely independently on our own. So, and we, in our first tour we did, we made money on our first ever tour being independent. So we were like, oh shit, like, this is real now. What ended up happening was me and Dave started talking about who can replace Brian Byrne. And I immediately thought of Brian Crouch, because I remember touring and playing shows with Hail the Villain back in the day when both My Darkest Days and Hail the Villain were independent. And then fast forward when we were both signed and now in the States touring together and playing shows together in America. And it didn't matter who the hell the headliner was. When you played with Hail the Villain, everybody was scared to go and play after them. Like, I don't care what the headliner of the tour was or whatever, the festival. After people saw Hail the Villain, they're like, oh fuck. Like, and I know we hated playing with them because it was just like, how do you like, Brian was just a crazy frontman. Like, how do you top that? So he really stuck out in my head. So I called him, and at first he was reluctant because he was out of music, like, after Hail the Villain, he blew out his voice completely. And it really fucked I think his confidence too. So I first time I called him, I think I actually had to pull at him a few times because he was just like, oh yeah, let's connect or let's chat. And I was like, just let's get on a call. Let's get on a call. Got on a call. And I kind of said, like, this is the vision. This is what we've done. And he was at first reluctant. And I soon found out that he was more worried about the expectation of we had of him. And he thought that we wanted him to sing like he didn't hail the villain, which destroyed his throat.
Very
And I
aggressive.
said, no, it was very aggressive and it destroyed his voice. And he was open. And I told him, I was like, man, like, you don't have to sing like that. Like, I love you as a front man and we'll find your new voice for this man kind of thing. And when he came out, he was a great fit for the next chapter of the band. And he did a fantastic job. And he's very professional, Ryan. That's another thing too. Like, he's timely, he's on time, he's regimented in a good way. And so I think we needed that at the time as well, and we had a lot of fun too. Like, he was a funny guy, very smart. Yeah, we had a lot of fun too. And he's great.
It's funny that he's that way because that's the opposite of the wild man you see on stage.
Oh yeah. No, he is like very like reliable. Like, if he says I never had to worry about Brian Crouch showing up, being there, whereas like Brian Byrne, also Brian's more airy, he's kind of like me. I'm like that too, where it's just like, sometimes you have to tie me down, and I think like I connected with Brian Byrne in that way too, because we're both kind of like, we could be like, like head in the sky, whereas Brian Crouch is very, all right, this is what's going on today. We're doing A, B, C, and D. So it was different. But again, we had a great tours that we did with Brian Crouch. And unfortunately, like I said, the tour ended during COVID, and we had to go back, and we didn't. COVID went on for so long. The shows kept getting delayed. I ended up moving to Florida. Default got back together, right? And I think that, unfortunately, sometimes timing things happen. So that's where it went.
We have a fan question from Russell Graham. Russell says, I found out about you when I went to see my good friend John Gabriel's band Altered Fate in Wasaga Beach, Ontario. I thought Bonds of Mara had fantastic energy and a great sound. Was it just timing that prevented Bonds of Mara from really taking off? So much talent in that band.
Yeah, he nailed it. It was timing completely. COVID, and it, like I said, our first song independently went top 15 in the country, and we were packing shows across the country, and it was freaking awesome. And it was just timing. And I think maybe we would have been able to get back into it, but it's hard when you have momentum and then the momentum completely stops. It's almost like you're starting from scratch again. Like, we had a top 15 song, and if we were able to then release another one and keep going, it would have been a lot better, But I think when you kind of go on hiatus for a couple of years because of a pandemic, it's like, man, we're gonna have to start this from scratch again. And then by that time, Default was already, and I had moved to Florida, so it kind of complicated things.
So we can't talk about Bonds of Mara without getting kind words sent in from your BFF, Dave Benedict. So this is what Dave has to say. He says,
Okay.
Sal Costa isn't just one of my closest friends, he's family. I first met him when he joined My Darkest Days, and we hit the road together on tour with our friends in Hinder. From day one, our twisted sense of humor clicked, and I knew this guy was special. What drew me to Sal was his unwavering dedication to his family. That kind of commitment is rare, and I've admired him for it ever since. Fast forward about 8 years, Sal calls me up with this wild idea. He wanted to start a band with Brian Byrne from I Mother Earth and Rich Bedeau from Finger 11. The second he asked if I wanted in, it was an instant yes. The chemistry between us was electric, and the songs poured out effortlessly. Sal is by far the most talented guitarist, singer, and songwriter I've ever had the privilege to create with. More than that, he's my brother. And honestly, I don't think I've ever laughed harder with another human being in my life. So that's from Dave Benedict.
I love Dave, man. And what he said, not about the musical stuff, but what he said about laughing, I've never had so many laughs in my life like I have with Dave. You want to hear a funny story, actually? A quick one? Dave and I, like he said, we have the same twisted sense of humor, and we can laugh like we can throw up laughing about stuff that other people would just not find funny at all, and just bleeding laughing for us. We were writing with Bon Samara once, and Dave had ordered a pizza or something like that. He had ordered a pizza, or it was a grocery store pizza or something like that. And we're all kind of working and writing. And Dave, I walk into the kitchen. I leave kind of the writing area. I walk into the kitchen, and I see Dave's pizza in the microwave. And so I take it out, and I'm just looking at this pizza. And I had been cutting a lemon because I drink lemon water. And I cut open this lemon. And dude, I've never seen this many seeds in my life in a lemon. I was like, this entire lemon is seeds. So I'm just shaking out all these seeds, and I'm looking at the seeds. I'm looking at Dave's pizza. I'm like, I don't fuck with Dave. So I start stuffing the seeds deep in the pizza, and a packet with seeds. Dave comes into the room, comes back to the writing area. And we have this all on camera because we had a kind of documenting the whole band. We had a guy named Randy, a friend of ours, kind of having cameras on us. And I didn't say anything to anybody. I didn't say a word. This was solely for me because I'm dark like that. Like, I would laugh and not tell anybody, you know. So Randy's filming, and you just see us writing, and then Dave take a bite of the pizza. He's, oh, what is that? And he's like, oh, it looks like a seed, man. I don't know, like, there's a seed in my pizza. He's like so confused, and everyone's like, oh, that's weird. And Brian Crouch, like I said, he's very ready. Right back on track. Okay, let's focus on what we were talking about. Let's focus on this course, and we'll go here. And then Dave takes another bite. He's like, oh, he's like, there's another seed in my pizza. He's like, it tastes like a lemon seed. And then I just started laughing my ass off. And anyways, I started telling him that I packed his entire pizza with lemon seeds. That he just started laughing too. And it's just our kind of humor. We fuck with each other like that. So anyways, yeah, he's the best. And Dave is honestly one of my favorite all-time bass players to play with. And anytime I think of anything musically, even my wife was just like, you're gonna probably call Dave to be a part of this. I'm like, well, of course, he's the best. I love Dave. So yeah.
I saw recently you posted some pictures of you in the studio with Lucas Rossi.
Yes.
Can you share any breaking news about what's going on there? What are you writing for? Is it for you guys? Is it for other artists? And for our listeners that maybe aren't familiar with Lucas Rossi, so he was the winner of Rockstar Supernova. So the winner of that got to become the singer in a band with Tommy Lee from Motley Crue, with Jason Newsted from Metallica, and Gilby Clarke from Guns N' Roses. They put out an album that went platinum here in Canada. He co-wrote, was featured on the song Neurotic by 3 Days Grace. Mm-hmm. What can you tell us about Lucas Rossi? What's going on there?
So first off, Lucas is 10 years older than me. So if we backtrack to me being 18 years old, 17 years old, I had played a show at Holy Joe's in downtown Toronto. And I don't know if you know what Holy Joe's was. There was a giant building. It was at Bathurst and Spadina, and there was 3 venues. The bottom venue was the Cathedral. The middle level, which was the best venue of all of them, was called the Reverb. And the very top level was like this little shithole called Holy Joe's. And I was 17 years old, and I played there with my high school band. And like I said, I took this shit seriously from the second I picked up the guitar. I was like playing all the time. And I was living at home with my parents. I was, like I said, I was 17 years old, and I get a call. Actually, I was sleeping. It was like a Saturday morning. And my mom's like, Sal, wake up. And on the telephone, there was a number, and it said EMI Music. And my mom's just like, Sal, EMI Music? This might be for you. I'm like, what? Answer the phone. And I'm like, holy shit, EMI's calling my parents' house. I have to get my number. So my mom, I think I run downstairs, I answer the phone, and it's an A&R person at EMI. And he's like, hey man, we have this artist that we're signing. It's a male rock artist that we've signed. And we saw you playing at Holy Joe's, and we think you're like a perfect match for this singer to play with. And like I said, at that time, I knew all the independent bands. I knew all the independent artists. I knew the people who were brewing good stuff and who were going to be doing big things. And one of those people that was on my radar at that time was Lucas. He had a band called Rise Electric, and they had a song called Headspin, and it was freaking amazing. And I was a fan of Lucas when he was independent, but he was signed to EMI as a writer. So immediately my thought was, oh shit, they're probably calling to hook me up with Lucas, because I didn't know anyone else that they had signed that was like who they were describing. And it turned out, I found out later, it was for another artist that they had signed, and I didn't end up doing it. But right after I got that phone call, like months later, Lucas is on this show, Rockstar Supernova. And I'm like, oh my God, that's probably why this thing never came together that I was supposed to do with him, because he was going to be on the show. So that's kind of the back history with Lucas. I've always been a fan of his. I think he's by far the most talented singer that I've ever met. And if you spend time in a room with him, even if you might have not been a fan of him, it is undeniable how incredible his voice is in person and how accurate he is in the studio. He is a one-take singer. Like, he doesn't need to do any takes. Like, you can be like, let's do it like that, and immediately it's perfect. If you need to re-record anything, it's only because maybe we want to do a melody or a lyric change, but it's not his performance. So he's that kind. I've always felt like that about him. So fast forward to my Darkest Days era, I was writing for one of the records, and I sent an idea to Lucas, and he sent me a vocal back on it. Never ended up using it for the record. But just like a month ago, I don't go on Facebook very much at all, but I needed to message somebody on Messenger. And on my feed, it was like, there was a video of Lucas that came up from his profile, and it just said, you know, I'm going to be performing a little acoustic show online tonight, Florida time. And I was just like, that's a really weird way to describe Eastern time. You know, it was just like, and I didn't think he was on tour by this description of what he was doing. So I just messaged him. I was like, hey man, I was like, are you living in Florida? And he's like, yeah. He's like, good to hear from you. And I'm like, where are you living? And it turns out he's in my area. And I was just like, that is strange. You know, two Toronto boys now moved to Florida. We're both first generation Italian. We have very similar upbringings. He grew up like a traditional, you know, foreign Italian family like I did. And it's been right at the point where I have been getting the itch to want to do something, you know, again, and in the next phase of it. So I just said, let's jump on a call. So he called me like 15 minutes later, and we just started talking and joking around. And he's like, well, we should meet up. Let's hang out. And I'm very, like I said, at this point in my life, I'm very conscious about who I spend my time with. I don't care what level or how big the person may be. They have to be compatible with like how I like to live my life as a person. I'm not saying they have to have my beliefs, but I am a very family oriented person. That's very important to me. And I need to be in a position where I know my family could be around these types of people, right? So the first thing I did was, he's like, let's go to the studio. Let's come to my studio. I've got this sick place. I've got like a writing studio that's really cool. But then I have this really awesome recording place, separate recording studio. Let's meet at the studio. I was like, let's meet for dinner. How about that? I was like, let's meet for dinner. So we met at one of my favorite Italian restaurants right on the beach on the Gulf of Mexico here. And we just had dinner together with his wife, who was awesome. And I really liked her as well. And we kind of got to connect and talk about a lot of things. And then I was like, okay, I think I want to jump in the studio. And so this month, we just started writing together. And man, it has clicked perfectly. Like, we're a perfect match for each other. And it's interesting because I've seen this as a 17-year-old boy. I'm 39 years old now. And I knew then that at some point, me and Lucas would work together. And it's funny because when I posted that picture, a buddy of mine, Josh Muta, who's an amazing dog trainer, really one of my best buddies from back home, he sent me a text. He's just like, I remember 4.5 years ago, you being at my farm and you saying you should hook up with Lucas at some point. So it was this time, it just kind of naturally kind of fell into my lap. So we started working together, and man, we are writing some awesome songs, really awesome stuff. And it's been really good. And we joke around and laugh a lot too, because he's first generation Italian. And when you have like, you come from a foreign family, there's a lot of like funny things that our parents do and did that we can just laugh about. So there's a whole other level of connection that we have even outside of the music. So that kind of is something we've just kind of got into right now, and it's going to be something. We already came up with a name. We haven't released the name just yet, but we will. And we're going to start putting other members here together over the next little while and see this thing through.
So this is going to become a band.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's going to become a band, and it's going to be really cool, man. It's like, it's very different than the other projects I've been in, but I think fans of My Darkest Days would still love this. But it's not My Darkest Days at all. It's different, but it's very cool. It's got a 90s kind of flair to it.
We got some breaking news, and I can't wait to hear the new music. You'll have to share that when it becomes available. And I have the final fan question here. This is from Brian Keith. Brian's question is, what is your favorite concert photo that's been taken of you? Can you think of some good photos that have happened over the years?
There have been a lot of awesome photos of, me like in a really cool pose with my guitar. But there is a photo that I have of myself and my now wife standing in Madison Square Garden before the show that we played. And that is a special picture to me because I had this DVD in my teenage years. It was Led Zeppelin playing Madison Square Garden in 1972. And there was this version of Since I've Been Loving You that, like, to this day, when I watch it, I'm mesmerized by this performance. And it was a bucket list thing for me to be able to play Madison Square Garden. And when we arrived there, there's a part in the DVD where you see Led Zeppelin walking through, the changing rooms and through Madison Square Garden. And we pull in, and I'm walking that same path that I've watched for years, and Led Zeppelin do, and mesmerize me. So that was so every time I see that picture of me and my wife there, it reminds me of that. And it's like you said, I do this a lot with business as well. And my wife, she's pointed this out to me, and I've started to see it now. One of my gifts that I have as a person is I can manifest things and bring them into reality, and I see them when I visualize something. It's so real in my mind that I think I just start moving in a direction where it starts aligning me with people and situations where it starts to become a reality. And I've told this to somebody before, but like I said, I've done this with other things. When I was a kid, I would go to bed every single night and I would have this reoccurring dream of, and this is what I'm talking about, I'm probably 8 years old when this started. And I would have this dream for years. And it was of me backstage looking as I kind of do now with similar looking bandmates that was in My Darkest Days, like kind of rock dudes. And it was just this dream. It was very short, but it was recurrent, where I'd be walking backstage. A guy would hand me a guitar, and I would walk up into the stage, and it was all from the back. So I never saw my face or anyone's face. It was all from the back. The band was from the back. I was from the back. And as soon as we would step on stage, everything lit up, and there was a screaming crowd. So I've kind of always been able to kind of manifest those little things. So I kind of think it was kind of the same situation with this as well. Yeah.
So we've made it all the way to the final few questions here for the interview. When you look back on your life and career, what are you most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of the fact that I did and I've done something that everybody said was impossible. And that's a lesson I share with my kids. Like, I don't have any limiting beliefs about anything. And I'm also always open to changing my opinion on things. So I can have a really strong opinion on something, but I always know that that might be able to change, just because I like to, I don't like anything to hold me back from a potential outcome in creating something that could be by like something that's limiting. And I remember being in high school and sitting down with my, oh my God, what are they called? What are those advisors?
Guidance counselor?
Guidance counselor. Yeah. And she was just like trying to sit down with me to talk to me about what I'm going to do next year. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be a rock star. And she just flat out laughed in my face. And it was funny because in that moment where other people would have been discouraged and or maybe angry, I looked at her like, you're stupid. You have no idea who I am. I remember thinking that, even being young, being like, you have no idea, like, I'm going to make this happen. And so I think the fact that what I saw as a kid manifested, I am more proud of that than the platinum, gold, #1, Juno, venues played, whatever. I'm more like, I value that more than anything. And even like, I went to college. I don't even think I finished the first year. I'd have to ask my mom. She'd probably know better than me because I wasn't even there. I was just not showing up, pretty much doing music. But I remember I was taking jazz as an elective and showing him music that wasn't mine, just rock music and blues. And he just straight up told me that's not music. And I also remember having one of those moments too, where just like, I'm like, man, you don't get it either. Until I had a professor in university who was my flamenco professor. And he actually called my parents one day and asked to come to their house. And I thought I was, my parents thought I was in trouble or something. And he actually came and said, I think you need to like lay off on Sal and let him leave college. Like, he's going to do this. Out of all the people I've met, here, studying music, he's the one that's going to be able to do this, and college is going to hold him back. So I think that is what I'm most proud of, is this like making the dream come true. And that's kind of something I kind of like share with my kids now. Like when my kids are like, say like things that they want to do, I'm like, okay, well, how can we get there? Like, what can we do to make this happen for you? And that's what I want, for the future, for their future as well, for them to know that there's anything, they can do anything.
What are you most grateful for when looking back on your life and career?
I am most grateful, I think, for the fact that I didn't get caught in, I did, but I didn't get stuck forever in the trap of music where you sabotage your entire life, marriage, relationship with children, kids, friends, for the industry. There's a lot of people I know at a high level that sabotage their marriages and stuff like that, and because they don't know how to say no. And that's something kind of I've been grateful for, is I had a lot of really good people around me that when I started to kind of fall into the trap and into the hole, they were able to kind of be like, music will be so much better if you have all this other stuff as well. So I think that's kind of the thing I'm most grateful for, that like I've had, like my wife has stuck through me through so much crazy stuff that's happened in my career, but that she's also, that I've also been able to have this amazing family and family life outside of music too, because balance is so important. Because in that industry, if you don't have it, you end up dead or you burn out. So you need both.
If you could sit down next to your 10-year-old self and you could whisper words of advice, taking everything you've learned since 10 years old, the lessons and the mentorship and the experiences, the ups and downs, the successes and failures, what advice do you give cute little 10-year-old Sal sitting there to help guide him through this human experience?
What I would give advice to anybody after having been through all of this, and I think one thing that I actually did do right, that I'm confident about, is two things. And they're going to almost sound like they're contradictory, but I'll explain how they're not, is you cannot have a plan B. If you have a plan B, you will most likely, everybody that I know that was in music or art that had a plan B, all of them now are in the plan B. Everybody I know that really only had one plan, those people have actually made it. And to just segue real quick, a buddy that I know from a while ago, his name is Phil X, know him through a friend of a friend. He made it in his 50s, and now he's a guitar player for Bon Jovi, like private jets, getting played a crazy amount of money, playing for his favorite band of all time. So I do believe that if the talent is there, you know, you will eventually, something will happen that will catapult you to where you need to be. And it might change a little bit of where you thought exactly you would land, but it will put you in a place where you're like, I'm supposed to be here, versus, I gave up and now I'm doing this. But the second part of that is that, and I've learned this, is I would tell any musician now starting, do not wish to earn your wealth off of music. And even if you do become successful in music and you're making money off music, it screws you over if your driving force is to build your wealth and to live your lifestyle through music. So I'll explain. When you are a struggling musician and you're following plan A, you need to have some kind of money coming in, because if you don't, at some point, you will do two things. You will either burn out and be, fuck this, I need to find a plan B now, or you'll sell out and you'll do something that you really didn't want to do. Okay. Now, on the other side of it, when you become successful and you're making money doing music, it's also a bad thing to want to make money off your art, because then you solely need to rely on your art to continue the lifestyle that you've now made. And that ends up affecting the art as well, because you're just like, okay, well, I did it now. Now, to maintain this life that I've created for myself, now I have to continue like making songs that people are going to like, so that I can continue doing this. Like, now I own home and this, all this kind of stuff. I have to do this. So it's bad for both the struggling artist and the successful artist. And kind of what I found was a winning recipe for me was I found ways to build wealth that was passive. So I had my kind of first job. I worked essentially illegally when I was 12 years old at a pharmacy, and I saved money throughout all of high school doing kind of menial jobs. And when I started to make a little bit of money with music and with my darkest days, the very first thing I did was start buying property, stuff that I was able to afford. And then over the years, in the background, I would continue to flip properties, buy more property, flip properties, buy bigger property, flip. So it was happening in the background where I was more able to focus on music. And whether I make $1 million off a song or nothing, I didn't have to worry about that, you know? So, and that could be tricky to kind of find that thing that could build something for you in the background. But I think it's actually important to be able to be an artist, because like I said, if you don't have those things happening, it could really backfire for you in a different way. If that makes sense.
Is there anything you'd like to say to the fans that have supported you over the years?
Yeah. Thank you. Because at the end of the day, it's kind of starts and ends with them. If they aren't digging the music, they don't, you don't get the tours. If you don't get the tours, you don't get to kind of share your art. So it's really important to have those type of people that, come out to the shows, that, listen to the music, because at the end of the day, it's really a big part of who you do it for as well. You do it for yourself, but you also do it to like connect with people that you don't even know. So they're a huge part of it all. Like without them, you don't have anything.
So as we wrap up, I want to take a moment to acknowledge you for your lifelong pursuit of mastery as a guitarist and as a singer-songwriter. I want to commend you for having a big vision for your life, for setting goals, being able to manifest them through hard work and putting in the time day after day until you did achieve all these goals that you've set. I want to thank you for putting out great music with all the different projects you've been a part of. Your music has become the soundtrack to the lives of millions of people around the world, including myself. I want to thank you for providing kind words for the Trevor McNeven interview. I know it meant a lot to him. We got him right in the fields. It made the interview extra special. And last but not least, I want to thank you for this interview, for sitting down with me for the last 2 hours, answering all my crazy questions. So Sal, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it was honestly an absolute pleasure, man. And like, thank you so much for having me. You're the man. Thank you.
Hey, you're very welcome. So to the Sal Costa fans, the My Darkest Days fans, the Smashing Satellites fans, the Bonds of Mara fans, and the podcast fans, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Who would you like me to feature next for a 2-hour deep dive interview? You can let me know in the comments. You can also send me an email at joelmartinmastery@gmail.com, or you can reach out to me on all social media platforms at joelmartinmastery. So I am done. I am complete. I approve this message, and I'll see you on the next episode.